Hello and welcome to The Public Good. This is Deja James from Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, which unites over 340 community organizations working to build a better Buffalo. We're delighted to join you every Tuesday morning at 10:30 a.m. on Power 96.5 FM and Mix 1080 a.m. You can also watch full video of every show on our YouTube page. Flagging for listeners, next year we are going to be Tuesday mornings at 11:30 a.m. after the new year, but I'll give y'all another reminder for that. Follow PPG Buffalo on Facebook and Instagram for more information on how to access video and full podcasts of our show. And of course, you can always get great information on our website, ppgbuffalo.org. Before I introduce our guests, I want to highlight a new way you as a listener can interact with us here on The Public Good. We want to hear your thoughts on how we can better our collective community. Email us at info@ppgbuffalo.org to let us know your ideas for change. We'd love to hear of community organizations you appreciate or initiatives you feel deserve more spotlight, even if they're your own. We also encourage commentary, questions, or feedback on any current episode. Reach out at info@ppgbuffalo.org. Be sure to let us know where you're listening from and who you are. Back to the show. I'm here with a really special guest, Stan the Man Martin, founder and CEO of Stan Martin Consulting, who is leading a really, really great initiative that I recently learned about with the youth and community to ban menthol tobacco in the city of Buffalo and hopefully beyond.
That's right.
He partners with local and national organizations to educate government policymakers, including the Buffalo Common Council, on how big tobacco has intentionally targeted Black communities with flavored tobacco products. He has submitted a proposed ordinance to the Buffalo Common Council, and with champion Councilman Rashid Wyatt, has actually recently, the council adopted a resolution in support of your effort. So I want you to be able to explain all of this for yourself. But first, can we just let us know, who is Stan the Man?
Thank you, Deja. Thank you. It's really a pleasure being here on your show. I'm a son of Buffalo. I often say, I like to start off that way, is that I'm a Buffalo native, born and raised here on the east side of Buffalo. And, I went to, at that time, Seneca Vocational High School. Now they call it MST, but that's a whole nother story. But, I went to, school here, and, I was very fortunate to go on and play basketball at Stony Brook University, be a student athlete. Mm-hmm. And, upon graduation, I came back home to really want to be, a part of the change, to make a difference and give back to others like me, in particular, mentorship with young African-American males or those who identify with the Black diaspora. Yeah. And just really, give back and share with others what other champions have shared with me.
Absolutely. Impactful. And I think that's a lot of what we want to do, right? Is like, we see the community we come from, we go out, get these resources, and we're like, okay, how can I bring this back to where I'm from instead of having to leave where I'm from to get it, right? I'm really interested because tobacco advocacy is just a very interesting niche type of advocacy work that you're doing. And so I want to know, how did you kind of get into the tobacco world? How did you get into that?
Great question. When I came back from college, from university, I was doing some work selling cable, and eventually got into health education, which was my niche. I was like, oh yeah, this is for me. Yeah. And one of my friends, she had saw a position that was opening up for a area manager position in tobacco. Okay. And working with the 8 surrounding counties here in Western New York for youth empowerment. Yeah. And I said, this seems interesting. Yeah. But I was like, tobacco, like, what's the big deal about tobacco? Right. I don't really get it. But I said, I will apply, and whatever happens. And I got offered the position, and I'll never forget, the interviewer, the director at that time, I said, well, what's this thing about tobacco? And they said, well, Stan, let me share this with you. Mm-hmm. And what they shared with me was that one of the things they said, if you become a part of this team here, you'll be a part of something that impacts generations to come. I'm like, well, tell me more. I leaned in on that. Yeah. And she shared with me the documents from the tobacco industry in particular. And one of the documents that I read that stuck with me, it said a tobacco executive was asked, do you smoke, tobacco? Yeah. And they replied, we don't smoke that. Yes. We reserve that right for the young, the Black, the poor, and the stupid. And that was over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
And that just sent the vibe through my body, through my veins, that I'm like, yo, I gotta be a part of this.
Well, it's one of those moments where the curtains came back and you saw the real. Yes. Like, it was like the thing that's usually said quietly was said out loud. And you had to act on something like that. I mean, I can't imagine me hearing something like that and just feeling like, oh, that's crazy, and moving on. You know what I'm saying? Like, that definitely would have put a fire under me as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine how you felt when you heard that.
I thought about me. I thought about my friends. I thought about my family. I thought about, my siblings. I was like, whoa, wait a moment.
Yeah.
Like you said, the curtain was pulled back. The light was shining. Yeah. So ever since then, I've been a part of this effort, locally and nationally, to really build awareness and educate, people about how the tobacco industry, big tobacco, really feel about us, how they really target us intentionally. And,
I feel like when I grew up, there was an active campaign against tobacco. There was, so many commercials, PSAs, tobacco's terrible. This is what a cigarette does to you. They show the lungs, they show the person with the tube in the throat, all of those things. And so for me, I always grew up thinking that's gross. I don't want to do that. But now it's shifted for a lot of different reasons. But I'm wondering if there's a generational difference, you think, in how people feel about tobacco and tobacco use. Like, is it mostly the older demographic that's still smoking? Or how do you think the public is now interacting with tobacco, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think one of the things is that we sometimes have the idea or position that it won't happen to me, or it'll always impact someone else. Yeah. So one of the things we know to be true is that scare tactics don't work. Yeah. Okay. Also, we know that individual change is important. However, the environment has to support the change that's necessary in order. For,
like, why is somebody smoking?
In order for that to happen. Yeah. So when we're talking about generational, there's different messages that's going to resonate with different people. Okay. And when we're talking about tobacco, let's be real clear. We're talking about commercial tobacco. Yeah. That's been manufactured, that's been altered, enhanced, saying, with flavoring, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So the tobacco industry, like I said earlier, I've been a part of this for over 20 years. Yeah. So initially, when the movement started, we were focusing on, combustible tobacco, and then the clean indoor air law came out, where no smoking in bars, restaurants, airplanes, et cetera.
And everything changed.
Right. And the tobacco industry came out with electronic cigarettes, with vapes. Right. So, and they made it cool, they made it hip, they made it, supposedly appealing only to adults as a safe alternative, but that wasn't true.
And that was the thing. It was under the guise of, this is going to help smoking cessation. Like, it was supposed to be the public health solve to tobacco, but really it was just a wolf in sheep's clothing. Exactly. Right.
Yeah. To addict, once again, to intentionally target and addict the next generation of replacement smokers.
And let's talk about that, because I get on the train and do different stuff, and there's kids with vapes. Like, as young as 13 years old, I've seen kids vaping. And I can't believe how, even though all the smoke shops and everything, they say 21 up, all of whatever the age limit is, like, people are still getting access to it, and it's being made to look cool because it's all over social media and different things like that. And like you said, the differential messaging for different demographics. I think for youth, like I said, when I was growing up, smoking seemed like the uncool thing to do, but I think that's shifted a little bit now. And I think the other thing you brought up that I think is so poignant is the environment. Like, why are you smoking? And what people really don't talk about is there's like a social and stress relief aspect of smoking. Like, most people enjoy their smoke break, or they have that habit for a reason. And so what are the other ways we can prevent or help them with stress that isn't a cigarette or things like that as well? So I don't know other advocacy that you work on for this, but I'm wondering specifically what state, and then we can talk about the city council stuff. But I know you mentioned you did state advocacy around this too, so I'm wondering a little bit about that work and what you were working on with the state to try and get this done.
Well, certainly in terms of with menthol in particular, in terms of with menthol, one of the things that we've done locally.
Well, what is menthol? I want for listeners that maybe don't know what menthol is.
Yeah, let's back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Menthol. Let me just keep it real.
Yeah.
All right. Menthol is the flavor in tobacco that it creates a numbing sensation in your lungs. It helps the poison go down smoother.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I really want to say that it makes helps the poison to go down smoother, so you inhale deeper. It's not as harsh.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah.
So that in itself, it gives the appearance that it's less harmful.
And it builds your tolerance. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That amongst other things.
Yeah.
So what the tobacco industry did was intentionally market and target, this product, in the Black community for over 60 years. Let me give you an example. We call this the African Americanization of menthol tobacco. In the 1950s, I know it seemed like a long time ago, right, for some folks from our listeners. However,
I'm with you.
However, less than 10% of African Americans or those who identify with the Black diaspora, smoke menthol cigarettes.
Yeah.
Okay. Fast forward to today, over 85%.
Oh my gosh.
All right, of African Americans or those identified with the Black diaspora smoke menthol tobacco. Even though we might smoke less, we die earlier as a result of not only tobacco use, but also related diseases such as cancer, heart disease, other cardiovascular illnesses.
Right.
So, and youth are twice as likely to start in terms of with menthol. Remember, it helps the poison go down smoother.
Right.
All right. Youth are most likely to start with the flavored tobacco, with the menthol tobacco cigarette, than with a non-mentholated tobacco.
Well, every kids love flavors. I mean, that's just what it is.
And the tobacco industry knows that too.
Exactly. I mean, why else make something flavored other than to try and get a larger audience? And what audience would you get other than kids with something like that? I mean, I'm sure adults, love flavors too and all those different things. But when we get into menthol and then there's grape and all these other different things and filters and all this stuff, it's literally like a candy shop. You go to the smoke shop, it's like a candy store.
Yeah, well, when you look in our community, today, let's say when you look at marginalized communities that are underserved, you have to ask yourself, why is it a smoke shop or a vape shop on every corner?
Yeah.
Why is it that there's a smoke shop or vape shop in close proximity to schools, daycares, or to where family oriented businesses operate? So going back to your earlier question in terms of legislation or just some of the advocacy work that we're been doing here in Buffalo and across the state, is really to look at eliminating and restricting, and even in some cases prohibiting, the close proximity, the time, place, and manner in which tobacco is advertised and how it's advertised in our community. So when I talked earlier about the African Americanization of menthol tobacco, you used to see an abundance of tobacco products on billboards. You should see it on TV. The tobacco industry sponsored civic organizations, events specifically target, to marginalized communities, so that they can show say that they're, responsible businesses. Oh, we got your back. Oh, we got you covered. Look at what we've done. Look at what we've contributed. Nah, like you said earlier, that's just a sheep in wolf's clothing.
Yes, it's product placement for them. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I get a little agitated, so I'm trying to.
Yeah, no, I mean, give it the energy it deserves.
Yeah, so I get really amped about when I think about, my community, when I think about how we've been preyed upon, I think about how we've been intentionally, targeted for profit, for someone else's profit, in particular, we talk about the disparities in terms of, there's tremendous opposition out there right now in terms of, well, why ban menthol? We should have the right to smoke whatever you want to smoke, or this going to intentionally target or increase policing in our community. The ordinance that we propose and that I work, if I'm not getting too far ahead.
No, please do.
That I worked in concert with other advocates here in the city of Buffalo, as well as with the Public Health Law Center.
Yeah.
The ordinance that's proposed has taken the heat out of the fire. And what I mean by that is that it places the onus and responsibility on the manufacturers of tobacco and on the retailers of
and not the individual.
And not the individual.
Yeah.
So the heat has been removed out of the fire of that argument. And there's no criminalization of possession of tobacco.
Right.
No, saying policing is an issue.
Right.
Certainly.
Of course.
Racial profiling is an issue. And this is not it. This is not a part of that. That's why we intentionally removed and addressed that issue early on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
In terms of, banning menthol tobacco.
And I think that shows the good faith that this whole initiative has, is that you're realizing the comprehensive, because at the end of the day, this is totally for our people in the sense of we're being targeted and we need to solve this issue. And so, of course, you wouldn't want to further criminalize us as Black people for this issue. You're already trying to help us with this issue. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are about why you feel like the Black community was the target, or why it was so easy for them to infiltrate our community with these products. And maybe there's no easy answer to that, but I'm wondering why we're so susceptible to kind of be these experiment audiences for a lot of these corporations.
I think the reason that the Black community or marginalized communities have been intentionally targeted, because going back to your earlier point, is that we have so many issues that we're dealing with, so many disparities, so many inequities, and this is another tool in the toolbox, all right, to keep us divided, to keep us confused, to keep us, really against one another to some degree. So when you look at, let me give you an example, some facts. All right, so let's look at the cost of tobacco. All right, the cost of tobacco, let me say a pack of cigarettes somewhere between $14, $20, almost $20, for a pack of cigarettes, right? Okay, so now you're a family, or you're a family that's struggling with groceries, or trying to put food on the table. And because of the addiction, now you have to choose in between providing food for your family or, supporting your habit, just addiction. And then in addition to that, let's talk about the stresses of your employment or of your job, or paying rent. So it's been promoted as a stress reliever. However, ultimately it creates more stress, right? On the individual and on the family. And then when you look at the medical costs in terms of tobacco use, just here in New York State alone, overall associated costs like roughly around, I think, almost $12 billion annually. And then with menthol, with tobacco, and specifically, let's look at Medicaid. That's $7 billion. So then, now, how does that impact the taxpayer? That has to pay for those medical costs of those who either can't pay, or those who are, unfortunately, have a disparity or a health illness, related to tobacco use, and that costs that household almost $1,000. What I'm saying? Themselves. So those, when you look at the economic costs, and how those lives could have been saved, how those dollars could have been saved to put elsewhere, you know what I'm saying? In terms of employment, in terms of education, in terms of healthcare, in terms of daycare, in terms of, toys for the holiday. Right. You know what I'm saying? Right. Food giveaways. Tobacco is the Grinch that stole Christmas. Ooh. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. For real. There's a seat at the table that someone, and all due respect, that might not be there as a result of this intentional target marketing. So this is all a ploy, in my opinion, and in some cases to keep us divided, and also to keep us distracted from really what's happening, and that is to addressing the root causes of poverty, to addressing the root causes and how the social determinants of health impact where we live, where we work, where we play, where we pray, where we learn, overall. Right.
And and the work you're doing is trying to address that. Big tobacco is already a huge thing, but when you break it down like that, and the other trickle-down effects that it has, even into just other social determinants of health for our community, because you're right, the $20 pack of cigarettes when you're struggling with groceries may be that argument in the family that, or whatever, or the sacrifice that you have to make. But then because of people's addiction, they're going with the pack of cigarettes. And that's really tough.
And let me share, pardon my interruption. Deja.
No, please.
We're not, and the people I work with, the different organizations locally and nationally, we're not against, those who smoke or those who utilize tobacco. Okay. We are against the tobacco industry. Intentionally targeting, marketing a community when used as intended will kill you, and it's preventable. It's the number one preventable cause of death amongst the Black community. So I just want to be clear, about that we're not against those who smoke, we're not against those who use tobacco, and we do understand and recognize that it is a addiction.
Yeah.
And some people need help. Not everyone can quit cold turkey.
Yeah.
Some people need tobacco cessation services or nicotine replacement therapy.
Right.
The lozenge, the gum, the patch. Certainly, those might not work for everyone. What might work for you might not work for me.
Yeah.
However, one of the important factors is that we provide an opportunity for people to at least make a quit attempt. And it takes usually 79 times before someone is successful.
Yeah.
And there's different motivators for people to make that quit attempt.
Of course.
Whether it's help or whether it's a child saying, Mom, Dad, I wish you would quit or stop.
Right.
Or other reasons, the economic cost that we just talked about.
Right.
So we need to tap in and be intentional about, creating those points of intersections that not only focus on the individual, but also focus on the community, on the environment as well, so that the social and the political, when we mentioned Councilman Wyatt and others, are working in concert with one another to create a safer and healthier community for people to thrive, not just survive.
Of course. And so I'm wondering your opinion on how surmountable do you think this challenge is? You've worked on this, like you said, for 20 years. You've seen it. You've been working on it, probably talking about it for as long as you've been working on it. And, do people receive it, or is there pushback from smokers or from our own community? Like you said, part of it is about dividing us. And so I'm wondering what the landscape has been for you in doing this advocacy work. What do you think your barriers have been? Yeah,
definitely. I think there is, first of all, the first part of your question, there's strong support. We are working very closely with the Buffalo Center for Health Equity locally. Our Buffalo branch, the NAACP, Reverend Mark Blue, they're supportive of this effort. Actually, the national NAACP has divested dollars from the tobacco industry. Also working very closely with Reverend Kaiser Pointer and the folks over at Roswell Park and everyday residents who live in this community. Tobacco Action Group. Annette Colden out there who might be listening or watching, and other TAG members who are really invested in this effort to see a better, healthier way of life. So having those who are deeply impacted by this issue engage in this issue, being a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. And in terms of the opposition, once again, dispelling myths in terms of the opposition with the tobacco industry. I tried to do in terms of the provocateurs and saying that, this is going to increase policing. This is going to be, this is going to increase, provide more access towards a illicit market. There's already a illicit market out there for anything that you want.
Exactly.
Okay. And check this out. There's no scientific evidence that shows that. However, there is scientific evidence that shows that, if you ban menthol, menthol tobacco in particular, you would save over 650,000 lives over the next 40 years, over 250,000 lives, Black lives, over the next 40 years. And within 5 years, you would see 5 to 25 years, you would see that disparity in terms of lung cancer deaths and, related illnesses drop significantly in between African Americans and Blacks versus, whites and other ethnic groups. So there's tremendous benefits, to that. However, the tobacco industry want to dispel lies. They want to engage their provocateurs, to really keep their pockets fat. And to keep people addicted to a deadly product that, when used as intended, will kill you.
My goodness. Oh, my goodness. I mean, it's just such an intricate web that you're trying to detangle here, and the hold that it has on the community that we have. And so I just fully support all of your efforts and commend you so much for doing this work, because it's just so crucial, and you've broken down so many other implications that it has that we deal with systemically that could be solved as simply as just taking the first step of banning menthol. I'm wondering what your next steps are. I know the city council adopted the resolution asking for state support, asking for the city to finally make this ordinance happen. But what are the next steps that you're trying to do? Actually pass the ordinance, probably, but what else are you seeking to do moving forward?
Well, the resolution is the first step. That's the first step in terms of working towards a city ordinance. Then I truly believe that if Buffalo if Buffalo is courageous enough, if Buffalo, the city council is bold enough, which I think it is,
I think so too.
It would be the model for the rest of the state to follow. We don't have to wait on New York City to do it.
No.
We can do this right here.
Yeah.
All right, in the Queen City.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then also some of the things that we're working on, it will send a message nationally, all right, to the Biden administration that has disappointed us tremendously, that has failed us tremendously this year in terms of not banning menthol on a national level.
Yeah.
That kicked the can, down the road, so to speak. And as a result of that, we know that roughly almost 1,300 lives will be lost a month as a result of that delay.
Yeah.
That delay has deadly consequences.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're going to be working towards as an action item to really have a march on Washington the 18th of January, with those national support.
Yeah.
For those who are involved in this fight will be going to the White House, to exercise, their right, to voice their opinion, to, rally, civically, or what have you, to express that and show that there is strong support, for this ban. So that includes faith leaders, that includes, mom, dads, that includes folks like me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yourself.
Yeah.
And youth as well.
Yeah.
Just to demonstrate once again that there is movement, and you can only hold a group of people down for so long before they rise up and push back. And
on that note, I really don't have much to add. You've done such a great job that's it. That's our show. At the end of the day, I totally support that we need to ban menthol because it could save, like you said, so many lives. And I fully commend, like I said, the work that you do. If you ever need any assistance, PPG is here for you, and I'm sure some other listeners will be too. Where can people reach you real quick if they want to be able to help or anything like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Please, if you want to reach me, please contact me at SM@Stan Martin Consulting. Once again, SM@Stan Martin Consulting. That's my email address. And also, before we go, I want to say if you are addicted to tobacco and you're looking for ways to quit, please contact the New York State Quit Line, which is here in our backyard. That number is 1-866-697-8487 or 1-866-NY-QUITS.
Thank you so much, Stan. I hope this helps so many people in our community. This is Deja James with Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, uniting over 340 organizations working to build a better Buffalo. It's the public good, Tuesdays at 10:30 a.m., next year at 11:30 a.m. on Power 96.5 FM and Mix 1080 a.m. Thank you all.